Well, hello all. I'm back after a week off, as you might have seen. Couldn't get my Ag Uncensored podcast out last week as I was dealing with a local flooding issue in my little hometown rural community. Well, not hometown. I'm not from where I live right now originally. Anyways, that's besides the point. Um, before I get into what I want to talk this week, just on that, one thing I kind of put out is kind of how rural life is and, community is so much. And, you know, I think just in brief, to reiterate that, a lot of what we're trying to do in ag, we need to do more in regards to working with our neighbors, our communities to get together, make these things happen. You know, yes, in the tech world, I think that's really important. I've thought forever that every kind of farming community should almost have like a AgTech get together type thing, precision ag get together, and some kind of do, to be honest, like different co-ops and agronomy groups and whatever. Sometimes they have their things, local dealers put on different things, dealerships, whatnot. I think though farmers themselves actually need to get together more on this. I know when I was younger, my dad always got together with kind of a local group for grain marketing and stuff like that, and to talk about some agronomy things and all that. And I can't even remember. It was every morning at our the local restaurant. Everyone was having coffee, and I would sit in there and just kind of fool around on the games and kind of sit in once in a while. And things like that are really helpful. And groups do that. It's not that it doesn't happen, but there definitely needs to be a tech focus in some of that stuff. So, anyways, I applaud that if anyone does it. And yeah, community's a big deal. So, what to talk about this week? I did have a recording of something last week, and honestly, I'm not sure if I'll put it out or not. Either way, I'm gonna do something new here. Uh, anyways, so I saw an interesting post this morning. It was someone in Australia, and it got me thinking a little bit. They're talking about basically all these great things that are pushed down their throat. They're, I think, a cattle ranch, giant cattle ranches out there. Of course, I think they do some farming, clearly, raising their own hay and forage and pastures and all that fun stuff. Um, but it was like, they're pushed all these things, and same thing happens here. It's like, oh, you know, for their instance, like, oh, cattle are great for this. Oh, but then they create methane. It's like, oh, you should use less pesticides, but then you should no-till and not till and it's really hard there for the people that don't know. You can't, like, organic no-till is insanely difficult to do. But here's the thing, there's all these other practices that people want people to do. Oh, save carbon. Oh, reduce fertilization. But increase biological. There's everything is contradicting itself to a point. Um, all of these great things that we can do on the farm that people want individually, they're powerful things. Things like I just mentioned. We need more conservation, yet we also need to farm these ways and do it these ways. But then these things help here, but then those things don't help there. In any realm, what we have such a giant problem with in ag is everyone thinking that all of these great things that people want, and even people will agree are good things, are just not possible all the time at the same time in the year. There's so much things that get in the way. Where I live, right around here, tons of tillage. More or less, you can't get into the field in the spring if you don't, at least to some degree. This stuff is like heavy clay gumbo ground. It's flat as a pancake, hence why I had some of the flooding problems from before. Um, Water moves slow, and being there's a lot of clay here, it doesn't like soak into the ground. It kind of just sits, and the the variation in elevation from one side of the field to another can be, in some cases, there's a few inches, maybe a few feet. Um, that just creates a whole nother slew of problems. And like here, no-till doesn't work great because of some of that situation. Depends on the year. There are times that you can get by with doing it here. Other times, not a chance. There's times you can't get into the field. The only way to get in the field, because you couldn't get in the last fall because it rained too much, and there's corn residue, you got to burn it. Yep, that doesn't sound very environmental friendly. But then again, we got to burn forests sometimes, controlled burn, and that's actually helps get forests going. Literally today, it is smoky as shit out. Why is that? There are forests in northern Canada burning. Now, a lot of them burn naturally. The boreal forests up there, like the oldest trees are like, I don't know, 200 years old. They always burn. They naturally burn forever. And sometimes we look at how nature works and we have to control it so much. It's like, well, I don't know, nature has its ways to figure shit out for itself. Um, as I've talked many times, ag is very nuanced, a lot of niches, different ways to grow crops. So to that the point, yeah, there's all these great things we can do, but we can't do them all everywhere. Cover crops are great. Cool, great. Well, in a dry year, cover crops take too much moisture. Wet year, they can work right, but then they can cause their own problems. Depends on how weather works. Once again, weather is everything. Up here, it gets cold really early. You can't, like, when you're literally harvesting usually soybeans and corn here, it's already been past frost. You can't, like, put cover crops in and they won't even establish. In season cover cropping, yeah, some people are playing with it. But it's also hard. You gotta spray, you gotta do all these other things. There's sometimes just not time for it. It just becomes a waste, and you don't really know if the juice is worth the squeeze. Okay, so I've established that's a problem. So for one, we have to try, for those that don't get these things, we have to try and understand that you just can't do all these things everywhere. You just can't. That's why there's 1,000 different types of equipment. That's why there's a bunch of different things of seed genetics and ways, different agronomy practices. What they teach for agronomy in UC Davis and California is way different than NDSU, where I'm at. It just is. Clearly, there is, some connection in some items, I suppose, or processes, but it's just different. So, okay, we got that. What does this mean from the ag technology point? Well, some things can be pretty universal, and it's not exactly the same thing, but I'm going to try to break it down a little bit. Um, Auto steer, pretty universal, can work basically everywhere. Now, the biggest nuance, especially in the early days, was odd shaped fields. Like where I'm at, everything's square as shit. Up and down, you're fine. Even row shutoffs and things like that are not as a big a deal here, even though it's all, just comes natural with new equipment now. Um, when there's lots of big hills, you needed compensation for that. That's more integrated now. But so there is some nuance there, but pretty much it's universal. But then you look at, you get into other things. I've been around the variable rate game forever, from using imagery and then working with others using all sorts of other data. Well, okay. So a big push always was in the corn belts. Like, oh, you got to get yield data, and then you build off that, crop removal rates, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, great. Well, that doesn't work as well up here or in, say, Western Canada, because people usually, larger farms at least, that farm the most acres have more than one combine, and getting all that disparate data in, and you know cleaning it up and calibrating it right. All these different combines. Every single combine's different. Even two brand new combines right off of the line. You get in the field, you set them exactly the same. I guarantee the settings will have to be a little bit different, because that's just how stuff is. Everything we build is sometimes a little different, especially with larger machines, and combines. There's it doesn't take much for their consistency to change, because they'll wear differently, especially if you get a used combine, just because it's the same model. Even if you have the same header, um, it'll be a little different. And so there's that. Of course, because of that, we use more imagery. People want to do that way, and more zone soil testing, because farms are large. You can do gridding everywhere. But you go to shows and it was like, we got to do gridding. We got to do this way. Well, we got to do zoning. We got to do this way. It's like, well, of course, if it works good for them there, fine, whatever. People, some aren't going to change away from that. Same goes for here. They're not going to go to gridding. There's all those nuances. And then with just how people do service, I can tell you unequivocally, without a doubt, how even same crops, corn, soybeans, call it, I mean, yeah, the big crops, how they do that in the South is a lot different than how they do it in the North. Literally, one of the largest ag retailers has two different business units, and they do it two different total ways. The whole management style of how those businesses operate, how the people farm, are different. But yet, in tech, sometimes we come in and say, oh, well, it can work everywhere. Well, sure, it potentially can, but in reality, it really doesn't. Um, Software, we've had this problem forever. Um, the the tools and processes with how people work, it's not as universal as you think, because of these nuanced ways people farm and the crops they do. There's just different procedures, um, and a lot of it too. It actually has maybe more to do with the crops they grow and the timing of the when they do it. You know, up here usually it's more than two crops. You know, three, four, five, six different crops is typical. So the procedures will change just as much as they change for different high value crops. Things that happen in California are different than they happen in Illinois. Those things affect the process and these frameworks of how people implement anything. That feeds into all these other cool things people want to do, of conservation things. Oh, carbon this and CI scores that, and how 45Z and the fuel mandate stuff comes out. It's just different everywhere. And with software, we've had it's been tough, because yeah, you can't also just build everything exactly for everybody, though maybe with all the new AI coding stuff, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around. Just how is it good, is it bad, is it kind of in between? Anyways, maybe we can get there on the software end, and some of the things I've talked about, I hopefully fit into that, where we can create some more open universal tools that are more broad. These broad based things, like I was talking on GPS, it's a little more broad. And then every group in different areas, someone else can pop up and kind of design some things the way they want to fit their procedures, because one software is not going to fit the procedure everywhere. Like when I hear groups from, say, Australia or Europe or Brazil or something saying, oh, we want to get into the US market because of blah blah blah, I almost tell all of them, don't waste your time, because your systems are just different. The way people talk, the way people act, the way they do business is just different. And that just translation of culture doesn't flow well when a software is developed somewhere else to another place. I've seen it tried 100 times. I've failed at it ourselves. Like, oh, we'll push into Europe. Oh God, this didn't really work the way the Europeans wanted, or into Australia, they do a little different. Oh, or in Brazil, oh, they do it a little different. Sure, the data and how it's created might be more universal, but how people use it and manage it and bring that into their procedures and processes is different. So those are the things we just got to be more aware of. Um, Robotics. Oh God, robotics. You really have to listen to this in this whole talk because a lot of you think your stuff can work everywhere, or you think robotics can work in every type of process. And I can tell you unequivocally that is wrong. Not saying robotics can't work in some form in every cropping system. It's that many of the ones that are out there, they cannot be universal. Now, some have tried to say we'll create more of this universal platform bot that can put different types of implements and sizes and things. Like, okay, that's a little better. I get that. At the same time, there's gonna be limits with all of that, even equipment, how it's done today. So some will say, oh, machines are gonna get smaller. It's gonna be more swarms. It's like, well, depends what it's doing. Like, I'm looking at the crops right here, right next to me. You know, literally, it's the sickest crap. A lot of the corn grows up here in 22-inch rows. No one's building a robot that fits on 22-inch rows. It's all 30-inch rows. Okay, even if this stuff was in 30-inch, which a lot of it is too. Okay, it could work up here. Well, it just rained in the last week 7 inches. I couldn't even walk in this field as a human with probably boots that were made to walk in mud. What do you do then? And then say it even that it kind of dries up. Well, like I said earlier, this is heavy clay gumbo ground. These little cultivators on some of these robots, they literally won't even penetrate the ground. And the weeds will grow so fast when it's rained that much and it's 80 degrees that you just can't even get in there. So these are these nuanced things. And yeah, sure, I'm sure those groups have thought, well, it won't be everywhere in pockets, but as I've talked before too, can the local system, the economy, community even deal with it? If you have a service or, oh, we have all these swarms of bots out there, are there's enough local people that can understand the technology actually help? Does that person that is running that system, do they actually want to live in a super rural area like I live in? I'm actually not as rural as, where my friends back home are and other places I live in state. Sometimes these things just don't fit, and that's okay. But don't try to put them everywhere. You have to realize these things. We have to realize in ag that not all the things that are developed for it fit everywhere. It just doesn't. Not every process is going to work perfectly. And yes, it gets down to, own your niche, own your segment. Robotics groups, you have to get out of your own way. Um, Software groups, you really have to focus on kind of your area. There's only so many that can do large, nationwide things. And either they have to be really simple because they hone in on that simplicity of what's more universal. That's why we just stuck to like the way we do imagery, because like we made it in a fairly universal way. And then what people do is they'll export that out, put it in some other software, do it kind of their way. Some of these giant softwares, well, there's only so many of them, and they're not handling the intricacy as much. Some are trying, although I don't think it's working as well as they think it is, but that's why other software will pop up and kind of fix the problem locally. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of it up here. Um, and I know that, it's same in Europe and places like that too. And yeah, look at the normal software world. There's a million CRM systems, a million ERP systems, a million email systems. All this is because everyone does little things different. Well, you know, with the tight margins in ag, it's made it hard too. Not everyone uses these things, and I think this is one of the reasons why. Another reason why adoption is the way it is, it's slower or lower, is sometimes people in certain areas don't feel anything is built for them, and it just doesn't fit within their way. And I get that. I get how that comes to be, and it's hard. And so, really, once again, it's no one's fault. It's bringing up another piece to this puzzle that we can't force ourselves to think that all of these great things in ag tech we're developing will work everywhere. The good ones have figured that out. The real good ones have figured out how to, scale it. That is really hard to do. It's really expensive. There's only a few things and items that work that way, and it's just tough. But what I'm more trying to get at is don't waste your time in areas that your product just likely is not going to fit 90% of everyone. Uh, it just doesn't work good. Hold on, I gotta get my dogs. I'll continue this. Get some panting out there. So, I mean, I have an exact solution to this problem. I mean, there is no. I've been, I guess talking about it is find where your things actually fit. Um, I'll tell you. I live right next to the Grand Farm, testing all sorts of stuff, and it's different robots and this, and that's great to showcase things and all that. But some of those things just don't belong here. Not that they're bad people or the system's bad. It's just doesn't belong to be tested. It shouldn't be tested here. It should be tested somewhere else where it's more logical. And it's easy to get caught in the idea that, oh, well, our stuff could work there eventually, because at least like robotics, a lot of it doesn't work anywhere at first. There are certain technologies where you don't really know where it fits. You have to find that. At the same time, anyone that's trying to create something new in the ag space, or make better through some sort of technological process, at the very least, even if you haven't been in ag and don't understand that, that's fine. We need people in agriculture that are not from agriculture. That's fine. I know sometimes it's easy to think people like me say, "Oh, these tech people from everywhere, get the hell out of here." Well, only yes if those people don't want to hear and listen and shift their thinking to what people that know in the industry know about. If you just don't try to interact, yeah, you suck and go away. Of course, in ag we have the opposite problem. Sometimes people in ag try to get into other segments they think they know. Perfect example is AgTech. There's been plenty in ag that's like, oh, I can just build this software, build this tool, and it'll be easy, and it's not. Um, that happens too. So there's two sides to it. Either way, though, you know, validate the idea with at least somebody that has some context. I can be one of those people. Give me a call. Sure, I'll take your money if you want to pay me for some advice. At the same time, I'm more in the line of, at least at first, I really just don't want people to come in and make a mess. So I'll just be very honest and blunt with them and take the call right away and say, hey, maybe you should just rethink what you're doing. I've had to do that with, unfortunately, way too many groups. And I know for a fact some have said, thank you. We definitely decided to go into a different industry with the technology we had. And maybe I suggested, maybe they rethought it, or who knows. Some of those have been robotics companies, by the way. Uh, just make sure you're doing that. If you think you have something that is very universal, um, just understand that universal might mean something different. Maybe it's universal for large farms, 5,000 plus acres. Maybe it's logical for them. For smaller ones, it's not. So just understand that. Maybe it's inverse. Maybe it's more logical for smaller farms. Maybe it's more logical for a certain crop. You know, I've talked about edible beans. Maybe it just makes more sense there. Or potatoes or sugar beets. And groups do this. It's not like this is what I'm talking about is not done at all. It's done constantly. It's more just, hey, I'm bringing it up, reminding people that not every conservation practice works everywhere, just as much as not every piece of tech works everywhere. Not every piece of equipment works everywhere. Like equipment built for Western Canada doesn't really work in, upstate New York. Probably can't even go down a road. Weight limits, all this stuff. Um, we have to understand those things, that just because it can do the job, it doesn't mean it's tuned to do that job. And just you have to think about it. If you don't, you're just causing your own problems. And this is where I think a lot of trouble has got in with, you know, from different startups and different groups. Well, it can't reach their sales market or numbers because, they thought the total addressable market was all this and all that. Well, I didn't release it, but what I was talking about last week is, and I haven't put it out, but I will, is we actually have a big numbers problem from this. So we have to be very specific. When you actually look at all the tech that's developed, there's not a lot of people that can actually practically use it. And even some of the things in ag that we talk about, there's just some that just can't do it. It's not practical for their operation, for the cost, for the effort, for the time it takes to implement it, the risk of what it might do if it doesn't work. Some of these things just don't work in certain situations. So your total addressable market is actually in ag. It's in most things in tech, it's actually really small. There's only a few things that are universal, can go everywhere. And most of those things have kind of been figured out. And I think AI is going to help that problem. It ain't. It just won't. Maybe in a few areas it can help kind of expand, make your product more useful, I guess, but and easier to use and whatnot. But really, there's just so much niche and nuance in ag. If you don't understand that the real numbers of people that can use your thing are quite actually small, then if you can't build a business around that, then probably don't build a business around it. Uh, you have to understand the numbers, and a lot of people think the numbers are bigger than they actually are. Maybe ag tech adoption with all these things maybe actually we're at our peak because they're just really practically the things we've built just doesn't work for that other percent. They just won't, they don't fit in. Maybe in a sense we've reached that and now we just have to hone that better. Now, I don't really believe that. I think there is a lot more potential use. It's just some of these tools don't work for that other group. It's not that the solution can't work for them. It's how it works doesn't work for them. So anyway, some things to think about. I'll naturally put this in a little newsletter, and my dogs are whining for food, and I think I'm done. I'm at my 30-minute mark, and thanks for listening, and curious on your thoughts around this. We'll talk to you later.